working now, the audio, and it's, oh my goodness. I'm going to have to go in and cut the first part of that out of the video so you get into the, and I'm not going to restart this, I'll just go back and edit the video. I do apologize for that. Like I said, I was having issues here for some reason. YouTube wasn't picking up my feed, and I do apologize for that. And again, the name of the show is the Bill of Rights and the States. Today's show, they're not actually being brought to you by, but this is the official drink of the Dan Clemens Show, Rocky Mountain High Brands, and it's hemp infused, 100 milligrams, and they got several flavors of energy drinks. They got energy shots, energy bars, Eagle Spirit alkaline water, the whole shebang. And I ordered mine on Amazon at this point because we don't have a local distributor yet here. And the reason why they're the official drink is because it helps me in my fibromyalgia. Or at least, let's put it this way, it seems to help me in my fibromyalgia. And I'm also a shareholder. It's part of my retirement portfolio, which I'm slowly having to, for some reason, if I want to get on disability, I can't have 401ks sitting out there, which I think that's hogwash. But that's them rules. So I'm striving and struggling to figure out how I'm going to get, not have to do that and still maintain an income for my family and everything. So hopefully, Dave, you can hear me now. Can you hear me now? It's a Verizon commercial. And I do apologize to everybody that was on YouTube trying to listen. It's one of those, me and Garfield do not get along on Mondays. I'm looking for my lasagna and a place to lay down and take a nap at this point in the day already. Oh, to get the full show, you have to listen to the BTR. You have to download the podcast and listen to the first few minutes of the show. Okay. Today's daily Bible reading comes from the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verses 1 through 3. And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And I like that, talking about the poor in spirit. These were folks that came to listen to the truth and the true word of God. They weren't haughty, self-absorbed, self-important hypocrites, as a lot of the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the members of the Sanhedrin were, that they didn't think they needed to hear the word of God explained to them by the Son of God, because they didn't believe that he was the Son of God. And so Jesus Christ said, Blessed are the poor in spirit. These people knew that they needed Jesus Christ and his word, and they knew that they needed what God had to offer through his son, Jesus Christ. This quote meal today comes from A.W. Tozer, and I like this one, I really do. Faith is seeing the invisible, but not the non-existent. The Hebrew writer tells us over in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Faith is based on evidence, folks. It's not some magical, mystical thing that just sort of falls down on you when you believe and are baptized. Faith is actual evidence in God's word that God, when he says he's going to do something, and he does it. And that's faith. That's faith. It's based on evidence. Today's short Bible lesson comes from Kevin Cowley over at gewatkins.net. Now, he wrote this clear back on October 9th of 2003, and the sermon is Sermon on Sacrifice, Inspiring Examples of Sacrifice in the Bible. And I skimmed down through it, and it looks like a very, very good sermon outline that if you want to take that and study that. I believe that there are a lot of sacrifices that go on even today. People sacrifice themselves for each other. And Christ even said, no greater love a man has than this, that he lays down his life for a friend. And Jesus absolutely laid his life down for us. Okay. Hopefully everything's working now. You can hear me on both Blog Talk Radio and YouTube. I have this video over from One American News Network, and it's remembering 9/11, and they do a very good job of that day. Like I said, there's so many conspiracy theories floating around 9/11. I'm not even going to tackle them all because they're just that. They're conspiracy theories. They can't prove them. Everything that they put forth as their reasons why it's an inside job and stuff like that. Very circumstantial. Very circumstantial. So let's get into this video here and about remembering 9/11.
And the nation continues to mourn as we mark 16 years since 9/11. One America's Greta Wall gives us a look at the events from that tragic day.
On the morning of September 11th, 2001, the Twin Towers stood high among the New York City skyline, but no one could predict the tragedy that would strike the buildings just hours later. 7:59 a.m., American Airlines Flight 11 departs Logan International Airport in Boston, heading for Los Angeles, California. 15 minutes later, United Airlines Flight 175 also leaves for Los Angeles from Boston. Then, American Airlines Flight 77, headed to Los Angeles, takes off from Dulles International Airport at 8:20 a.m. And in New Jersey, United Flight 93 departs Newark International Airport at 8:41 a.m., traveling to San Francisco. Within just 42 minutes, 4 planes are in the air with terrorists on board. Flight attendants aboard Flight 11 are the first to report hijackers, and at 8:46, the terrorists fly the plane into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
Yeah, dispatcher. Yes. This is off-duty firefighter Jermaine. I guess you got this already. But you got a plane crashed into the World Trade Center. You aware of that? You have a plane that crashed into the World Trade Center in Manhattan? World Trade Center in Manhattan.
17 minutes later, an image that is burned into the minds of Americans unfolds on live TV as hijackers fly United Flight 175 into the South Tower. By 9:31 a.m., President George W. Bush declares the events an apparent terrorist attack. Then, just 6 minutes later, Flight 77 crashes into the western side of the Pentagon. And at 9:59, the South Tower collapses to the ground. For the first time ever, all flights over or headed to the continental United States are grounded by the FAA. United Flight 93 is now the only plane still in the air, and the pilots send a mayday call to air traffic control. After those aboard the flight hear about the attacks in New York and Washington, they attempt to take control away from hijackers. The Boeing 757 crashes into a field in Somerset, Pennsylvania at 10:07 a.m. 2 hours and 8 minutes after the first plane took off in Boston, hundreds of Americans have been killed as part of a terrorist attack. But the death toll would continue to rise. The World Trade Center's North Tower collapses at 10:28 a.m. Americans across the country are in a panic as the president announces U.S. military forces worldwide are on high alert. George W. Bush returns to the White House at almost 7 p.m. and declares a war on terrorism during a nationwide address later that night.
America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism.
Today, the skyline of Manhattan looks different than it did on the morning of September 11, 2001. The One World Trade Center, also known as the Freedom Tower, opened on November 3, 2014, and stands on the northwest corner of the World Trade Center site. Memorials have also been built to honor the victims. The 9/11 memorial opened on September 11, 2011, in remembrance of the 2,977 lives that were lost in the tragic events of that day. 2 reflecting pools now sit within the footprints left by the Twin Towers, with the names of every victim inscribed into bronze panels around them. There's also a Pentagon Memorial in Arlington County, Virginia, and a Flight 93 National Memorial in Pennsylvania. September 11, 2001 was the single largest loss of life from a foreign attack on U.S. soil, a day that will never be forgotten by Americans.
None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
All right, folks. That was a good recap of what happened on 9/11 that day. There's a lot of people that have a lot of stories that they remember where they were at. I told you where I was at heading into New Jersey. And when I got over there and we got unloaded and loaded, it took a couple hours to do that. We were afraid we wouldn't get out of New Jersey. They were waiting to see if the governor of New Jersey was going to shut down the border to try to trap. They weren't sure about the terrorists, or they weren't sure what was going on, for days after that, completely what was going on. When I got back over the PA-New Jersey border, they had PA state troopers and New Jersey state troopers there waiting to shut down. I don't think they ever gave the order to shut down the borders going out of New Jersey at the state line going into Pennsylvania. But that day was pretty scary for everybody, and more so for the people that were in the towers and got killed there. And again, real quick here, this idea that this was an inside job, that those towers couldn't collapse. If you watch that video with the South plane, or the plane heading into the South Tower, it pretty much blew out like 4 floors. And the way those buildings were built, it was sort of like almost like balloon construction in a house, but not quite. And so it took out the structures. They were full tanks of fuel, jet aviation fuel, which is kerosene, and that had spilt in there. At those altitudes on the buildings, there's a constant wind up there. There's a constant wind when you get over a couple hundred feet off the ground. I know I used to work on skyscrapers. The biggest one I worked on was in Columbus, Ohio, that topped out at 425 feet, and anything above 200 feet, every day we went up there, even if it was a calm day on the ground, you go up there and you had wind up there. And that wind was fanning the fuel, making it hotter and hotter. And so this idea, this inside job thing just drives me crazy. I don't know why people don't have any better thing to do with their time than come up with conspiracy theories. Okay, just a little, I know you're probably tired of hearing this, but Hurricane Irma, the main part of it is in northern, above Jacksonville and Tampa and that, and it's brushing through a little bit over to Mississippi, not quite, Alabama, Georgia, and it's the way they're saying it's tracking. We're gonna, if it doesn't start tracking to the east soon, we're gonna get smacked square in the teeth up here in the central Susquehanna Valley, because if you look at the line going up here, up through Charleston and Pittsburgh, anything east of that line that's going up there, that's the Appalachian Mountains, folks. And it seems to funnel any hurricanes that come on the western side of Florida, and that's exactly what happened. I even actually came up through Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, and Mississippi area and stuff like that, and we really got hammered up here. Hopefully we're just going to get a glancing blow on this. I'm not totally 100% sure about that, but I'm hoping that's all we're going to get. And they're talking possibly Wednesday that we're going to see a lot of that rain. So we'll just have to sit still. But that's where Irma is, and then you got Jose. If you look out this way, where I'm sort of circling around this, where it says St. Kitts and Nevis. Jose's lurking out there, and that's the next storm that's going to be coming up in there. So when it rains, it pours, folks. And this is hurricane season. It's nothing out of the ordinary here. And I do have some articles in here. We're not going to really get into them that much, but I have some articles in the show notes page that are talking about the let's see here. Well, Tom Sims over at One American News has an article over there, Irma, a major event for insurance industry. And Houston, you have Harvey, that's going to cost a lot of money for the insurance companies. You got Irma now, that's costing a lot of money. And I'm still trying to do some finding out about hurricane insurance in Florida. I know you have to have your house built to a certain standard in order to even get a policy. And I remember watching This Old House. They were down there. They were talking about this. They're actually raising houses and getting them up out of the floodplain and doing everything to code. It was really neat how they lifted up these slab houses with this concrete slab. It was really, really neat how they did that. But and tying hurricane ties on the roof, we actually use them up here. There's a lot of cities now and a lot of places with new construction, and actually you have to put the hurricane ties on your roof joists and rafters that tie them to the wall. And I think that's a good standard practice because, you know, we, like I said, up here in the central Susquehanna Valley, we can actually get hurricanes up here. There's a story, this is funny. It's over at Mother Jones by Rebecca Lieber. Now, she's very, she is off point so many times in her articles it isn't funny. Here's why Florida is so much more vulnerable to hurricanes like Irma right now. And it's, let me get over here real quick. Here's why. Just in the first couple paragraphs. This is funny, folks. I gotta get this out of the way before I get into my Bill of Rights spiel. Hurricane Irma is making a beeline for Florida, and this is posted on September 8th over at Mother Jones. This weekend, now Category 4 storm, it is so big and has proved to be so devastating that Governor Rick Scott has advised 20.6 million residents of the Sunshine State to prepare to evacuate soon. Florida's vulnerability to a catastrophic storm has been obvious for years. Poor development planning, storm amnesia, I don't know what that has to do with it. Like folks that live through these storms down there forget the storms. My wife still remembers Hurricane Agnes back in 1972. It really did a number on the central Susquehanna Valley up here. So, again, like I said, I think these folks over here at these very, very progressive news sources just want to throw these phrases out. Faulty insurance system. Now, when you hear these anti-freedom folks over at Mother Jones talk about faulty insurance systems, they're talking about the National Flood Insurance Program. And again, it's we talked about this last week where these government programs like this actually skew the market, allows people to rebuild in bad areas, especially floodplains. There's nothing you're going to do about the wind. I don't care where you build. It's like out in Tornado Alley out in Oklahoma. Or, you know, these other states get devastated by these tornadoes, Mississippi, Alabama. They're all over. Tornadoes land in almost every 50 states. However, they rebuild. The community comes together and rebuild these things, and they don't have a national tornado, you know, insurance. And FEMA doesn't have the budget to rebuild all these places. So what happens? You know, charities, friends and neighbors get together and they rebuild. You know, donations come pouring in there to buy building materials so these people can rebuild their homes and stuff like that. It's fantastic when you let people in the free markets work. I mean, I just found this out this morning. Walmart has people that actually watch the weather and these very devastating areas that might get hit by tornadoes or hurricanes or whatever. They preload supplies that people are going to need into those areas, especially the warehouses and stuff like that. And they have other warehouses that are ready. They got trailers that are ready to go after it's over that they can keep going down there. Church of Christ Disaster Relief does the same thing. There's other denominational disaster relief programs that go into these areas and bring, you know, cleaning supplies, food, clothing, appliances. The Church of Christ Disaster Relief is, I don't know how well known, but in the Brotherhood anyway, they're fairly well known about, you know, how they get in and stage all this stuff with the Church of Christ. So this faulty insurance system, they're talking about the government doesn't step in and do what they're supposed to do. And then finally, a strong dose of climate change denial. Oh no! These climate change denials make Florida so vulnerable to these hurricanes. And I tell you what, it is amazing to me. I deny climate change, so that makes the hurricanes worse, or makes Florida more vulnerable to hurricanes. Okay, how does that happen, right? Now they claim because we deny man-made climate change. They never put that in there. Man-caused or man-made climate change. Never put that phrase in there, and so it just amazes me how they still are getting away with this. Now, of course, folks like me and the freedom movement, you know, we call them out on it every time we see it. So, but just because I deny a strong dose of climate change denial, nothing. Let me repeat this. Read my nose. Nothing that you and I are going to do, whether we add more carbon or take more carbon or greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere, are going to do anything to weaken or strengthen these hurricanes. They are what they are. If the conditions are right for a strong hurricane, it's going to happen. There have been many hurricane seasons we haven't had a single named storm because of El Nino out in the Pacific. It cuts the top right off the hurricanes in the Atlantic, and we don't have named storms. We don't have a lot of water usually, rainfall and stuff, and we fall into drought situations and that. But man-made climate change is a myth, it's a fallacy, it's a fraud perpetrated on the people of the world. And no matter what we do, it's not going to change these hurricanes. And I just think it's funny that they still put out articles like this all the time. Just wanted to share that with you. Just to let you know that I am looking at these anti-freedom publications like Mother Jones, Slate, Salon, and some of these other things out there. So I also have an article over at, where was this? Let me see here. Oh, the Daily Signal. The myth of climate change created Harvey. The myth that climate change created Harvey and Irma by Nicholas Loris over to Daily Caller. And I got to put that in there. Caller.com. Okay. All right, over to Daily Caller. And this was posted on September 8th. So there's a good article in there about that. And so that's something that you need to think about. And go in and do some of your own research. I've been doing a lot of research and seeing all these lies that are coming out, and yet they still want to claim that man is causing the climate change on the planet. I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous. It's the arrogance of man, the hubris of mankind. All right, couple more articles before we get into our Maryland gun laws. 2018 could be a year incumbents are shown the door in a Trumpian. I didn't mean to say it 3 times. A Trumpian manner by Jenny Thomas over at the Daily Caller. And this is one of those articles I was reading, and I honestly I believe what Jenny's saying, because we're in a situation right now where the establishment Republicans and the establishment Democrats are thwarting everything, or trying to thwart everything that President Trump is trying to do. And I'm making a prediction right now. If things keep going the way they're going to go, President Trump is not going to have a lot of legislative victories between now and the midterms next year. And if that's the case, because of President Trump's actual, not fabricated popularity or lack of popularity, as the lamestream media would try to tell you, but you look at the crowds that go sees this man. Because of that, incumbents are going to be an endangered species next midterm, because there's going to be a huge backlash in America over this, because they see guys like Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and Schumer and Pelosi. They see them as obstructionists. They see the Democrats definitely as obstructionists, and they see the GOP establishment as obstructionists. And I'm telling you, folks, there's going to be a huge backlash against incumbents in the midterm. Mark my word, September 11th, 2017, Dan Clements said there's going to be a huge backlash against incumbents in the primaries next year. And I'm almost for certain there's going to be, this will be one of those years that goes down the record books and the history books of how many incumbents aren't going to make it back in their particular races. I may be wrong, but I'm just looking at what I see as far as the crowds and just what I read on Twitter and stuff like that and different social medias, that these Trump supporters are getting very, very upset at the establishment right now. And if the establishment doesn't wise up and start working with President Trump, I mean, there's a huge movement against Paul Ryan in his home state, and the guys that are running against him in the GOP are actually gaining traction in his home state. We're talking about Speaker of the House. His home state, he may lose in the primaries next year. So I'm just saying, I think the American people are very, very fed up with Washington, D.C. The American people voted, the majority of the American people voted through the Electoral College now, mind you, And I still think that President Trump, in my humble opinion, took the popular vote too, with all the shenanigans going on in California, those 11 counties out there that had well over 100% voters, some 100, as high as 130% in some counties, had more registered voters than they had residents of voting age. And that would equal up to the 5 million difference between the popular vote that Hillary Clinton won over Donald Trump. And if these other cases hold true and these votes were fraudulent, I think you could almost say, if it turns away from Hillary Clinton in the popular vote and they start going through there and truing this whole thing, that it'll be a landslide, both not only in popular vote but also in the electoral vote. And then you're going to see heads roll in Congress. I'm putting that out there as a prediction. I really am. So I want to talk a little bit about the Bill of Rights, and especially the Second Amendment. Now, I don't have to repeat it to you, but the right for the American people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now there's a militia part to that Second Amendment, but if you go back to at the time of our founding, everybody from the age like 16 to 60 was in the militia, was expected to have a firearm at their house. So if they were called up to defend the colony or the state, they would have them. They would have the initial equipment they need, and shot and gunpowder to repel an invasion or whatever, an attack or whatever, right off the start. They would have that with them, so that they wouldn't have to go to a garrison or an armory to pull weapons and stuff like that. They had them with them, and you got to understand the terminology of the day. I had a gentleman on a friend of mine who's a libertarian on his feed. We talked about this, and he told me I was wrong about the National Guard, and I said no, I wasn't. I said in Article 1, Section 8, the only body of people that have the right to call up the National Guard for a national emergency is Congress. Now, in early 1900s, they made the National Guard Act, and I told the guy, I said, yes. I said they did that as an end around the Constitution. You can't just make a law that modifies the Constitution. The Congress can't make a law to give away their powers to the President of the United States to call up the National Guard or the militia. That needs a constitutional amendment. And I never heard anything else back from this guy. I said, you need a constitutional amendment to do that. And they were wrong. It was an overreach by Congress and the President. And so anyway, the Bill of Rights were ratified by, at that time, the 13 states. And one of the things that got the Constitution ratified was the promise that the first thing Congress would do, and they did do this, surprise, surprise, once the Constitution was ratified by the 13 states, that they would immediately work on the Bill of Rights. Now, we got the first 10 amendments of the Constitution are considered the Bill of Rights. And basically what this does is these God-given rights that are talking about over in the Declaration of Independence, where Thomas Jefferson, along with he was a part of the Committee of Five that penned the Declaration of Independence, said that we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal and endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, and among these, not limited to these, among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So they understood that rights come from God, and they're given to mankind. And mankind has always, men and women have always preceded governments. So these rights we have predate any governments. So what the Founding Fathers sought to do, and there's a debate whether they're right and wrong in doing this, and I'm not going to get into this. I think they were right in doing so, my personal opinion. They were explaining these rights, and it's very important when you get down to the 9th and 10th Amendment, when you talk about the Bill of Rights, and let me just get over here real quick. The 9th Amendment of the Constitution reads, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. And then the most important one, the 10th Amendment, the powers not to delegate to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So you have all these amendments, and the first 10, and basically what they were doing is they were trying to protect. The Founding Fathers thought they needed to spell out some of these rights, not all of them, because if you read the 9th and 10th Amendment, they know they didn't cover all the rights that the people have, but they wanted to make sure that these basic rights that are the people's that precede government are protected from interference by the government. Now, I had people tell me that like these restrictive gun laws by states and cities, municipalities, that those protections are about the federal government only, and I have to disagree with them. These protections are protections from government and protect the freedoms and liberties of the people, no matter what level of government that is, because if you think about this, folks, the states are the ones that created the federal government. After Revolutionary War, and they declared themselves to be states, and if you look back at those terminologies, each state was sovereign in and of itself. Each state was like, if you want to think about it, they were like an individual sovereign nation that wanted to cooperate with each other, but they understood that there were certain things that they needed done that they couldn't do as a collective by themselves. So that's why they formed the federal government, chained in the constitutional box, as it were. At least that's what they tried to do. And this is just, I love the anti-freedom folks out there, even back in the founding of our country, because they decided that, well, you know, these are just suggestions and we can just go on and do what we want. And this ideology has filtered down to today. We had people under the Obama administration, people that supported Barack Obama 2008, 2012, that said, well, we voted these things in. We wanted all these changes so the president can do these changes. You know, it's totally legal. And I'm like, no, it's not. He doesn't have the constitutional power to legislate and change things that way. But there's a lot of people out there that are ignorant of this. Same way with the Bill of Rights. There's a lot of people out there that are ignorant about the Bill of Rights. These rights are ours. I don't care if you live in a city, a borough like I live in, a state, a county, or in the United States of America. The right, like the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Those are our rights. Our Second Amendment protects the rest of our rights. The First Amendment allows us to actually articulate our grievances with the government and our grievances with our fellow citizens. And in signing, in ratifying the Bill of Rights, the states had to ratify the Bill of Rights in order for them to become part of the Constitution. In the ratification of the Bill of Rights, they agreed to these. Our Bill of Rights are not just a restraint on the federal government. They are not. If you read the preamble of the, you know what? I don't think I have a preamble in this one. No, this copy, I have a little PDF copy that I printed off that I keep on my desk because I wear these out so quick. I don't have the preamble in here of the Bill of Rights, but the thing with the Bill of Rights was that the Founding Fathers recognized that the people, I need to reiterate this, that the people have these rights that predate and precede governments. And so Maryland there's a lawsuit against Maryland here. Let me get over to this article here real quick. This is by Stephen Gutowski over at Washington Free Beacon, posted on September 9th of this year. Federal judge ruled on Monday that a lawsuit against Maryland's law requiring a license to purchase a handgun could move forward after denying the bulk of the state's dismissal request. In his ruling, Federal District Judge Marvin Garbus said the plaintiffs have standing to bring their case against the state handgun qualification license and order discovery in the case to move forward. Accepting the pleadings as true, the court finds that the plaintiffs allege adequate facts to present a plausible claim that the HQL provision and regulations have deprived them or their members or customers of a Second Amendment right to possess a handgun in the home for self-defense. Garbus wrote in his ruling, accordingly, count 1 shall be dismissed. This case stems from Maryland's law requiring those who want to purchase a handgun to obtain a license before doing so. In order to obtain the license, a Maryland resident is required to obtain training, submit an application to the state police, submit electronic fingerprint record to the state police, pay associated fees, and pay a background check. The same background check is also required when purchasing any firearm in the state, whether from a license holder or in a sale between private individuals. Maryland shall issue a gun rights group, and one of the plaintiffs in the case has criticized the law as unnecessary and discriminatory. It's redundant as to the current law, which already commands the background check to be done. Mark Panek, president of the Maryland Shall Issue, told the Washington Free Beacon. The whole idea, I think, is this was the underlying intention, was to discourage as much as possible the exercise of your constitutional right to buy a handgun. Panek said the law placed a particular burden on rural Marylanders who don't live near a facility that provides the required electronic fingerprinting services, and urban Marylanders who don't live near a public gun range where they could complete the required live fire training. He pointed out that Baltimore, Maryland's largest city, does not have a single public gun range within the city limits. Judge Garbus wrote that the arguments made by the plaintiffs were sufficient to plead a Second Amendment claim, and the case should proceed. The amended complaint details the burdens associated with the application process, including the specific cost and the 27 or more days of wait time to receive an HQL. Garbus wrote in the ruling, it is not necessary for a plaintiff to explain why she specifically lacks the resources to pay for the application. Common sense allows an inference that a person could be burdened in some capacity by the HQL application process, which could cost hundreds of dollars, require at least 4 hours of training time, plus time spent on completing forms and getting fingerprints, and many days of wait time. These allegations are sufficient to plead a Second Amendment claim. The judge did dismiss the plaintiff's claim that the law training requirement violated the 14th Amendment due process protections because it provides no appeal process for those who've been denied training certificates by their instructors. The judge said the plaintiffs failed to plausibly allege that the instructor certification requirement violates procedural due process. Panek celebrated the ruling as a win for his group and the other plaintiffs in the case. Federal District Court Judge Garbus swept away the state's arguments and denied, in all important respects, the state's motion to dismiss. Panek said that the message to supporters, the court first sustained the standing of MSI and the other plaintiffs to bring this suit. The court then held that the plaintiffs had stated fully sufficient claims that the HLQ statute and the implementing state police regulations violated the Second Amendment. So there's a couple more things to read down through. It just talks about discovery and stuff like this. But I think the most important takeaway here is Maryland has these restrictions in place and have to get a license, even if you're just going to have the gun in your house. We're not even talking about concealed carry here, folks. They didn't even make it that far in this lawsuit as far as I could tell. There's a burden in Maryland for you to have a license to even have a gun in your own house for protection in your own house. What part of the Second Amendment shall not infringe, when you get down to it? A well-regulated militia should be necessary to the state, the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say that the government is the only one that can't infringe that. Shall not be infringed. And what's happened in Maryland with this restrictive gun law is it's infringing people's constitutional right to keep and bear arms. There is a movement underfoot, and I didn't get a chance to research this a lot. We talked about this before on the show, where Congress could, and it's in their purview to do so, they could pass a law. As a matter of fact, I think this is one of these things, if we get into a convention of the states, that we maybe need to add this as an amendment to the Constitution, that constitutional carry is law of the land. And what that means is you still have to go through background check even with constitutional carry, but that's it. That's it. Now, the only restrictions on a constitutional carry, because you wouldn't have to have a permit to either carry it openly or concealed, it's constitutional carry. Private property owners. I can't, exercising my Second Amendment right, I cannot violate somebody else's right to because it's their property. I talked about this a little bit in the earlier part of the show about not being, I was never born a liberal. I was never raised a liberal, so I don't have to go through a red pill moment. Okay? But it's their property. If they don't want guns on their property, that's their constitutional right. I have to abide by that. And I'll just give you a good example. Panera Bread's one of these national chains that they do not allow firearms on their premises. There are some movie theaters that do not allow firearms on the premise in their building, and they're privately owned. Yeah, I have to respect that. Now, doesn't mean I have to go patronize them. Doesn't mean I have to go consume their products. You know, it's my choice as a consumer. If I don't agree with their, gun restrictions, I don't have to patronize that place. I don't have to go there at all. I've been to some places that do not allow open carry in the store. You know, it's okay to conceal carry. They just don't want to see the open carry in the store, and that's fine. You know, but again, it's private property. Then you get into the sticky wicket about schools and universities and stuff like this. They're public. They're public. And I think if teachers and in colleges, you got students that pass a background check and they're of an age, if they want to conceal carry, that's their constitutional right to do so. For cities like Chicago, I'll pick on Chicago and New York, for cities like these to restrict gun ownership to the point, they're worse than Maryland is. Maryland at least gives you an opportunity, or there's a small chance that you can obtain a permit to have a firearm in your house. But Chicago and New York, no, they don't want them. Now, New York, I understand you got to go through a real big process to be able to have a concealed carry weapon, but usually it's either in your vehicle or at your house, can't carry it. In Chicago, like I said, it's a no-go in Chicago. And so these cities, and D.C. is the test case here, and I understand D.C., the Heller case, the justices said that, yes, this Second Amendment right is a personal right of the American people. The government didn't give it to you. This is something that the people had. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. Something we had before the government was formed. So Chicago's been in violation of this ever since D.C. versus Heller. And any other state or municipality has been in violation of the Constitution ever since, even before D.C. versus Heller. But that ruling came down and said, this is a right that the people have that precede government. I cannot stress that enough, folks. I really cannot stress that enough. That our right to keep and bear arms is something that precedes government. And for Maryland or any other municipality to restrict that right goes against the Constitution. They need to stop. They need to stop what they're doing. And they need to cut it out. Now, I had to go through a background check, and I paid for the background check when I bought my pistol. I'm not going to show my pistol on air here. I have a 9mm along with some shotguns in the house, and they are my security for the house here. My Smith & Wesson security, as they might say. But I had to pay that background check. That was it. I had to prove, with my driver's license, social security number, that I was a U.S. citizen and over the age of 18, allowed, by that criteria. They ran a background check. Everything came out all hunky-dory like I knew it would. And I walked out of the store with that pistol the same day. Because in Pennsylvania, you have instant background checks. So as long as your background check clears, you got it. If I go to a gun show and buy a gun, some gun shows have the instant background check there, but a lot of them don't. So what happens is you can apply for the background check, buy the gun there at the gun show, at whatever reduced priced it is, and then you can go to most of these are local gun dealers. They don't come from out of state. All these that come to the gun shows I go to are local ones within a certain geographical area of Pennsylvania, and it would not be that much of a struggle to actually get and to go to their gun shop and get the gun there. But a past couple, this has been a couple years ago, the gun shows I went to, they had someone there that had access to the instant background check, and they offered that service to the vendors. And so folks, as long as you passed the background check, you proved everything else, you could walk out of that gun show with a gun. Now, if you live out of state, that's not the case out of state. And this is the loophole they always tell about these gun shows. If I lived outside of state, what I'd have to do, and a lot of these dealers have acquaintances in other states, like where these people live, and say, look, there's a federal firearms dealer, FFD, that we can ship it to down there. You could pick it up down there. And that's how it happens. That's the truth of the matter. So your rights, just remember, folks, just because there's a Bill of Rights in the Constitution doesn't mean that the states and cities can actually ignore your rights that are God-given to you and you had well before this government was ever created. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, hit it every time. Have a great rest of the day and God bless. And we'll see you tomorrow at noon.